Hey guys, I'm Brad Montgomery, and welcome to The Breakdown. And here we talk about science, psychology, as well as investing. Today we're going to be talking about college spending and some better ways to possibly save while you're in college. Before we get started, if you missed any of our episodes, you can always go to kfoxtv.com/the-breakdown. Now let's break it down. So, Pearl Contreras, Community Engagement Officer, and we're going to be talking about basically financing and budgeting, kind of how it works, different aspects of it, and possibly even some ways to save and better manage your money, which can be hard when you're in college. I mean, when I was in college, budgeting wasn't always on the forefront of my mind. And then when you realize you're starting to get a little bit low on money, then all of a sudden you start to think about it, but sometimes it's too late at that point. So we're going to talk kind of all aspects and maybe help people save a little bit better while they're in college. So first, let's get right into it. What are some better ways to keep track of money and expenses while in college? You know, like for my example, maybe help. I did an okay job, but it wasn't, when you're in college, you're worrying about supposed to be worrying about studying and school and then also going out and having fun. And so budgeting is not really something. I think you kind of look at money differently, especially when you're that age. It's like you look at it very short term. Okay, I've got enough for today and tomorrow, it's fine. Someone wants to go out to dinner, go out, get some drinks or whatever, and then you go and you pay some money for that. You don't really think about it, but you don't realize how quickly things can add up. And there's even times when you go to the grocery store and you're like, oh, I got all this money. And then you come out of the grocery store and you're like, oh my gosh, I only have this much for the rest of the week.
Right.
So what are some better ways to kind of, broaden your horizon and maybe your time scale as far as managing your money so you have a little bit more lasting you longer?
Right. Well, I'll say that budgeting is hard for anybody, whether you're a college student or not, right? It's always tough to do, but it's a very important step in managing your money is creating that budget and being consistent with that budget, right? So a lot of times people will create a budget, whether that's through the use of apps or an Excel spreadsheet or whatever works for them. But what we see a lot is that people don't stick to it. So they try it for a little bit and they forget about it. And so then that's when it really gets tough. So it's being consistent with it, being disciplined with your budget. But one of the budgeting techniques that we teach when we do our financial education classes is the 50-30-20 rule, right? Where 50% of your after-tax income goes to your needs and the things you need to pay, your bills, groceries, food, all of that. 30% goes to your wants. So for people in college or for anybody, we're not saying don't spend money on things you want.
Exactly,
that's not what we're saying. But just don't spend all your money on things you want, right? So 30% on, things like concert tickets, or if you want to go out to dinner or go to the movies or, things like that. So 50-30, and then the 20% is paying yourself, is putting that money into a savings account or an emergency account.
I didn't even thought about that when I was in college.
Oh, right. Yeah. No, a lot of people don't think about that. So
50-30-20.
Yes,
so
50-30-20 rule. Yeah. Money on simple.
What you want.
Yes. And 20 is paying yourself in savings.
Okay, that's pretty smart. Okay. What would you say? I mean, like a lot of people that just kind of go into it, because a lot of people are just kind of thrown into it, like you said, you're trying to manage your class schedules and the books and the tests and all this stuff. So how do a lot of people go into it? Do they just kind of cast their fate to the wind and just kind of see how it turns out at the end of the month and then
I feel like that's almost kind of what happens for people to realize that that they need a better system for managing their money. I feel like that's something that we all go through to know that
this isn't working.
It's not working. And then, it kind of forces you to try something different.
Very true. So you mentioned apps and my thing, they've got an app for everything, but it gets to your point, your original point. If you're not consistent and you're not, if you open it up one day and you kind of set it up and day 2, you're kind of all right, this is cool. And then by day 5, you forgot you have it. then it's not really helping you at all.
Exactly.
Are there anything? So, would you recommend an app, or is there something that sticks stronger, is a little easier to remember to use?
And it really just depends.
Okay.
It really just depends. People learn differently.
Yeah.
People, it just depends on the person and what they're more comfortable using. There's a lot of apps out there, which is great. There's a lot of even on your online banking tools and resources on wherever you do your banking, they have tools like that. But I know for me personally, but this works for me, is just Excel,
Okay,
an
yeah.
Excel spreadsheet. It's a little
It sounds
old school.
so not fun though.
Right, I know, it's so not fun, and it doesn't, there's nothing glamorous to it, but it's what helps. It's what helps me, and it's easy to edit, and it's easy to add and remove things, and so that's what I use. That's what I stick to. But again, just because that works for me doesn't mean it might work for you.
Well, and
there's a lot of
in the kind of the conversation we're having right now, it almost makes me think you have to hit that wall.
Yes, I think,
and that's what's going to make you stick to it. You get through 1 month, you kind of scrape by. Maybe the next month you're under a little bit, and then like the month, halfway through the third month, you're like, you know what, this isn't my way's not working. My way's not the right way. So
right, yeah. Unfortunately, you're right. I think you do have to get to that point.
And so, as far as like expenses, what are some things that can come along that you weren't expecting? You mentioned the 50, 30, 20. Right? 50 for what you need, 30 for what you want, and 20 to save. That's where that 20% comes in.
Exactly.
So what are some things that can come along that, you're off to college, because that's the last thing. You're literally thinking about the things you're worried about, the stuff you're going into.
Right.
And you're not thinking about what can happen.
Right.
Month, you're like,
so anything can happen, right?
Yeah.
So car trouble, brakes, tires, things like that. But more specifically for students, and it's funny because I interviewed my brother who just graduated not too long ago, and so he was telling me that there's even things like homework, like to complete your homework assignments, that you have to buy these sets and you have to purchase these things.
Right,
you have to purchase
true.
your
Lab
Scantrons for the tests, which aren't, I'm sure, not a lot of money, but all of that adds up, and labs, projects. Your parking permits, which I don't think students, parking tickets and permits. Exactly. Yeah. And, so I think that's something that's often overlooked when you're budgeting or when you're thinking about kinds of emergencies, is things like that.
And when you mention like parking, I think it's the budgeting, that 20% actually really helps out a lot. And I think it can maybe just take the stress level down, because I've seen, and we've all seen our friends in college, they get, all of a sudden they'll have like a parking ticket, or they get a speeding ticket or whatever. And, this extra is 75, plus court fees, plus whatever. They're like, I didn't have, what's going, they just freak out because, they didn't plan.
And then your insurance premium goes up.
That's
you
right.
get a speeding ticket, and that's something, you don't budget for.
Right.
But definitely something that happens.
And you have to tell your parents about it. So
you have to tell your parents.
So yeah, which is not fun. Now, so we're going to get into some numbers here. As far as where we are now. So obviously everyone's budget's a little different. So we're going to do a little bit of a range. Okay. So 22 to 25,000 per semester. And that's going to get you through a semester if you're careful. Okay. About 12 to 15,000 of that is going to be for tuition. Okay. And that's not very flexible. There are some other areas that you can maybe save, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But tuition is pretty set.
Right.
You can't really bargain with the school.
Right.
If I come to class a little early, no, they're not going to.
I wish they should have a program like that.
That would be nice.
That would
incentive.
be great.
Yeah, actually. So you had mentioned one thing, and because a lot of people, we were talking about, I don't know if you do student loans.
I did.
Okay, you did. Okay. I did one when I had gone back to school for one semester, and I did it through Wells Fargo. And as quickly as it was just adding up, I didn't do it anymore. I made some just cuts. And I was in my 20s at that time. So I was able to do it. And it wasn't, I was in my late 20s. So, you've got a little more money if you're coming in your late 20s and your early 20s, right, in general. So I was able to kind of make some cuts and not have to do student loans again. But I was surprised at how quickly it adds up. And it just shocked me and scared me. And when they, oh, are you ready for next semester? I said, no. I said, we're done. And I paid it off that one semester. But you were talking about public versus federal. So obviously it's public. What's the difference?
Private versus federal loans. Yeah. So there's those options. And federal loans are a little more forgiving. They offer the income repayment plans, right? So based on how much you make, then you can pay back a certain amount monthly based on your income, right? Whereas private loans, it's a little more, they're a little more strict, and they have a term and an amount, and it's fixed, and that's what you owe.
That was Wells Fargo. They were
no matter where you work, no matter what your situation is. That's just kind of those are the terms of the loan. So they're both different. However, private loans, you can borrow a higher amount through private loans if you need to. But that's that can be good and bad. So
exactly. Of course, they'll let you borrow more because you're going to pay it back. So
but of course, that's more money, it's more interest, that's a bigger payment. So
do you guys be just kind of in that financial world as far as like the people coming into it early on in their 20s and such? Do you see more private, or do you see more federal? Or it seems like I hear about more people doing the federal programs, like
more federal thing. I think and that's just from my experience and when I was going to school and when I was applying and how they and again I was 18, 19 years old, right out of high school, and you're applying for these loans and you don't know anything about the differences at that age, and so I think it's just education and knowing the difference between the two.
And I think maybe federal they're both be so bad because, like you said, they're a little more flexible. A little more flexible, and they offer the deferments and things like that. That's right. Yeah, that would help as well. Okay, so $10,000 for just the general $10,000 for living expenses, and this is where you can be more flexible, right? So obviously, we're looking at $22,000 to $25,000 to get you through a semester. $12,000 to $15,000 of that is for tuition, as I mentioned, not too flexible. $10,000 for living expenses. Maybe a smaller apartment, maybe some roommates. And I did a smaller apartment that wasn't like right across the street from the school, but it was like 3 blocks in. So I could walk.
And you didn't have to deal with the parking permit.
I didn't have to deal with the parking permit.
Or speeding tickets. I
didn't have to deal with speeding tickets. And and it was funny. And this is kind of a helpful little thing. I actually stumbled on this by accident. So this place, it was like 3 blocks in. So because it was a few blocks away, it wasn't as expensive as the ones right across the street. So I saved a little bit there. And at first, I actually, maybe for the first week, I was trying to drive. But I started running into cars and couldn't find a place to park already within 2 blocks. So I'm like, I'm just going to walk. And walking was nothing. It was, walking from, 3 blocks to campus, I'd walk just as far when I'm on campus.
Right, exactly.
So it literally made no difference at all. So I saved, like you said, on parking permits, less chance of a traffic violation. And it really wasn't that bad. And then, as I mentioned, depending where you live, though, that can be a little more of an issue. I mean, I think, NMSU in Las Cruces, I think I dealt with rain a couple of times. I mean, I think it was maybe snow flurries one time. It was a little uncomfortable, to walk 3 blocks. But maybe if you're, Montana going to school, or Eastern Washington State, or Utah, it could be a little bit, you may want to be a little closer to campus. But even then, I think 3 blocks isn't going to kill you because, you can always dress for it. So that was one way that I saved. And it's everyone to their own, I want to throw the roommate thing out there. I don't know if you did the roommate thing or not.
No, I didn't have to. I was here. You stayed.
Home, okay, there you go. Even better. So I didn't want roommates. I had a roommate when I was in the dorms my first semester, So second semester, I was good. Had a great time, and he was a great guy, and we're actually quite a bit alike, but a little more introvert. I still had my own place, and that's where you have to find what you need to budget for, you know. So even with that could have been a way that I saved a little more, but I wanted my own space at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
So again, they like you said, living on campus. And maybe not living right across the street from campus, but maybe a few blocks away can save you a little money. As well as there are some other ways too that we're going to get into here. So moving on from living expenses, also food, gas, electricity, utilities. So I've noticed something, and this is just being out of school, but I've replaced everything with LED bulbs. And my electric bill went down like a lot.
Right.
And so if you can, you know, and a lot of times apartments aren't even that big.
Right.
But, you know, get the 2-3 bulbs that you've got, throw in the LED. They're more than enough, bright enough anymore.
Yeah.
And that'll bring down your electric bill. When you're looking at gas and utilities, you know, you don't think about this when you're in college, but maybe have the AC set at 78 instead of 75.
Right.
You know, I mean, you're not going to die. And, you know, you can always turn it down a little more at night, you know, if you like a little cooler at night, but then it's not running so hard during the day when the sun's shining through the windows and everything. And that can save you a little bit as well. And then also maybe not so many trips, you know, carpool with friends. And that's what we would do. I remember at MSU one time we had wanted to go up to TRC. And we all carpooled, and it was great. We just kind of gave somebody like $5, and they were like, great. And it was, so, I mean, everyone ended up paying less. We still got to the same place, and we had a great time. So there's ways that you can do it if you think of it. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like you and I are in the back end of this.
Yes.
So looking back, you know, we can kind of pinpoint the few times or the times when we did think of it, and it did kind of benefit us and save us some money. But it was literally just, you know, a quick minute when we thought of it and we're like, oh, it's a great idea. It wasn't necessarily something we did all the time. I think if you do these things all the time, keep the AC up a little bit, you know, replace your light bulbs, maybe, you know, not as many trips or carpool when you do go on trips, especially with gas being so high now. And then also they have this thing called meal prepping. You know, when we were in college, when I was in college, I had, you know, you go find it's funny, you don't even think about it now. But I remember they had like the $1 frozen burritos, you know, when I was in college. And I think they were more tortilla than anything else, right?
Probably.
Frozen chicken burrito. Not a lot of chicken in there.
Right.
But
yeah, you don't eat very well when you're in college.
You don't, you know. And so, but I remember thinking like, oh, jackpot, you know, I can afford this. You know, when I'm hungry, it'll be there for me. And so, but now you can do like meal prepping where you can make yourself a bunch of rice. You can bake or even slow cook like a bunch of chicken breasts and some vegetables and just put it in your little containers and freeze it. And then I find that to be helpful because then you're not wanting to run out and grab food all the time.
Right.
That can add up quickly.
Yeah. So saving on, exactly. Yeah. So I think just making those small adjustments with things. And then another thing is subscriptions, right? So things kind of like reevaluating your subscriptions.
Everyone wants in your pocket now.
Yeah, exactly. So just seeing what you use and what you don't really use and what you can cancel or eliminate.
Maybe take YouTube with ads.
Right,
you know,
right. Right. It's not going to hurt you.
Right.
You can do ads.
Skip. It's necessarily, you know. And now even I actually give an example, you know, this is another way to save, which you wouldn't necessarily think about. But for those going to and into college or have kids going into college, there's different like levels of subscriptions now that they offer on a lot of these things. Like my daughter loves to watch Netflix. There's like several shows, kids shows and movies, kids movies that she likes on Netflix. I don't watch a lot of stuff on Netflix. I do a little more now because of her, but I got like the half subscription where it's like, I don't know, $5.99 a month or something like that, but it's with ads. And it's not even that many ads. Yeah. It was like we watched a movie and there was an ad in the beginning, and then the movie it was the rest of the movie. Yeah. So, I mean, it's like half of what the normal subscription is. So if you don't need to pay full price, you know, kind of look at where you can save, like she was saying, and level it down a little bit. And then it all adds up.
Yeah. And taking advantage, I'm just going to add something.
Yeah.
Also taking advantage of student discounts. So for some of
that's
these
true.
subscriptions, like Amazon Prime, I know has discounts for students. So, looking at that can also help.
That's true. Yeah. I remember that too. When I was back in college, there were some things. And then find the places that like maybe don't cost as much, like when you go out. We used to find, if we were really hungry, because that happens when you're in college, and and we would go to every now and then. It was like our treat, but we would go to Peter Piper, and I think the buffet was like $4.99 or something back then. It was like $5,
Wow.
And so
I wish it was that.
I
now.
know, right? Actually, it may have even been $3.99. It may have been $3.99.
Okay.
So, but yeah, times change. So, but yeah, we would do that maybe once every other week. So that way you can kind of have your fun. You're splurging a little. You're kind of going outside the lines a little, but not, $4.99, $3.99. It's not going to break the bank. I think that's one of the things that people forget when you talk about the needs, 50%, and then the wants, 30%. I think the wants get out of control. And I think they do on accident. I think it's one of those things where you just don't plan. And that's part of budgeting. You start to go out a lot and you don't realize it. And then all of a sudden you're running out of money. And you're like, how did this happen?
Right.
And you go and you look back and you're like, oh, well, I was hungry on so-and-so, so I went and got food from so-and-so. And then I wanted Italian on Friday. And then on Sunday, we all went out to, Fridays or, so it's just one of those things that it can kind of spiral.
Exactly.
Before you realize. So to your point, 20% for saving.
Right.
Now, that's going to be like your emergency fund.
Yes.
Okay. So
emergency or setting fund.
Okay. Even goal setting. Okay.
Yeah. So it's your emergency, or maybe you're working towards saving for a goal. I think we talked about this last podcast, that's what it's for. And I was going to say that if you don't have, so 50% is for needs, but if you don't need to use all 50%, half of your, half of your income, you don't need to use all that for your bills and groceries, then maybe apply more to your saving. But
I like that.
People usually do is like, well, there's more to wants now.
That's true. Yeah.
Because I don't have that many bills.
No, it's true. When somebody finds an extra 100 or whatever, they usually not like, all right, savings account. That's not their first. That's not their first instinct.
No,
right?
Yeah, they're gonna go buy shoes or something.
Right.
So, yeah, just being smart with it and being disciplined, I think,
and mindful.
Key. And mindful, yes.
Yeah, disciplined and mindful. Sure. I think because the wants can kind of get out of control. So meal prepping, again, lowering the AC. I mean, all these things that
little things.
The little things. And it's funny because a lot of these little things you start doing as an adult, and you realize if you do this, like if you think of it like, you turn this down the style a little here, this style down a little there, then eventually like you notice a pretty big change. So it's just the stuff that we don't think of when we're in college. So again, that's a great way to do it and look at it. So, okay. So we talked about the 50, 30, 20. And I want to get into this really quickly because this is important. So you're moving into a dorm, whether you've got a dorm mate or not, you're going to set it up, right? And sometimes you get a little carried away with what you want. Okay. So I would almost ask, would you maybe dip into the 20% of savings? Would this kind of like constitute not necessarily like an emergency, right? And you want to be, maybe you can go to like a thrift store and get, sometimes they have some pretty nice wooden stuff even that you can get that will hold up really well. But they're not going to charge you what, some of these high-end furniture places would charge you. But maybe would that be a little nice area to maybe at least tap into for that needed expense? Or is that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say yes, if it's for things you need for your dorm. I like the thrifting idea though, because that came to mind when you were saying that, because you can buy a lot of secondhand stuff for your dorm that, works perfectly fine.
Yep.
And it's like chipped in the corner, but it works just fine. Also, I noticed that a lot of people going off to college that are moving into dorms, that they spend a lot on making their dorm look nice and pretty. And
right.
you go to the Target section, they have like the student,
they
section,
want you to get
and
their
it's like
stuff.
the pretty furry rug,
Yep, that's right.
and the like cool sleeve of shoe pockets for just things like
it's
that.
Little creative stuff that they
that you end up spending a lot on all
Right.
that stuff. And
Very true.
I think that
ask yourself,
right.
do I need the shoe sleeve holder?
It's pretty, and the
Right.
little all those little things, like the cool little like blue microwave or something,
Right.
things that they sell. But I would say that again, now that I'm older, maybe then I would be like, that's what I want to purchase, right? The cute stuff.
It's gonna save space. And
it's a space saver,
Right.
and it's trendy and it's cute.
Right.
But I think that the 20% of what you're saving, yes, should go to what you need, but only the things you need.
Got it.
And I guess you won't know that until you're moved in and until you're in your dorm, and then you have that money and you can say, okay, wait, now I need this because this doesn't fit. And
Right.
then you purchase
Exactly.
it then at that point.
Exactly.
And not before.
Right. No. So that's exactly what I was thinking. So give it some time.
Right.
And and actually I was telling my daughter, she had wanted to buy, it was actually the movie that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you know what? Let's give it a week. And she said, why? Because sometimes you want stuff and then you think you want it, but you don't really want it.
Right.
And then sure enough, she gave it a week. She still wanted it. It was fine. But sometimes those wants that feels so strong in the moment fall away.
Mm-hmm.
And so get what you need. And then, don't necessarily wipe out the little Target student section that they've got little cute little couches and rugs and then just get what you need and go back to your dorm, live in it for a few weeks.
Exactly.
And say, okay, you know what, that little shoe holder, I really didn't need that.
Yeah.
So,
and a lot of times you don't really even know what your dorm is going to look like and the dimensions of it, and
that's true.
Until you're there living in it. So.
All right. And where can people go to find out some information as far as maybe tips on helping the budget or even learning how to?
Definitely. So on our website, rise.us, we actually partnered with they're a financial wellness program. It's called Bonsai, and you can access Bonsai in their platform, which is a bunch of resources and tools, a huge library of everything and anything finance related. So you can access that by going to rise.us under the About section, Financial Education, and you'll see it there. It'll take you straight there.
And thank you very much, Pearl Contreras. Great to have you on again.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Cool. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to comment, subscribe, and share it with your friends. You can check out our past archive of episodes on kfoxtv.com or listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for breaking it down with me, and we'll see you next time here on The Breakdown.